Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Lynne Southerland. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to
Can you,
be here.
can you introduce yourself?
Well, like you said, I'm Lynne Southerland. I'm a filmmaker who has spent the bulk of my career in animation. So let's talk about that.
All right, first question. You're from Philadelphia. How was it growing up?
Oh, um, uh, Philadelphia was a great place to grow up. Obviously, it was a different time than now in the sense of being a kid. Probably all over the country was a much freer experience than it is now, and I could walk places. It's still to this day, though there's only two things I miss about the East Coast because I live in LA, and they are walking for like a purpose, like you're going to the store or whatever. Whereas here I walk a lot, but it's more, that's my exercise.
Yeah.
And the other thing I still miss is warm summer nights because it's always chilly at night in LA. I feel like I think the other thing I feel really fortunate about in growing up in Philly was my parents knew lots of professionals. So I grew up in a world of Black professional adults who, so expectations were high that you would grow up to be something.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily follow the track that probably was expected of me, but I hope if my parents were around, they would be proud.
Yeah. So what are some of your best childhood memories?
Oh, best childhood memories. One of the truly best ones was my mother's best friend lived next door, and she spoke French. And one summer, she taught us kids on the street some French, and we made a little movie where we spoke French. And to this day, I wish I could see that movie again. But that's one of my fondest memories. And getting to go to camp out in the middle of nowhere was really great. And I was always I loved school. So literally, I was excited every, Labor Day that we were going to go back to school.
Can you talk about the impact of like your parents' parties and like sneaking to watch your father?
Yeah, it almost didn't matter which house we lived in, but there was always, my parents threw parties, and my father was a real mentor. He loved to tell stories and make people laugh, and so the parties would be, once I was a little older, then it could be that I get to help serve things and whatever, but at some point you're shooed off.
Yes.
Even when you're a little kid, they might bring you down to show you off for 2 seconds and then you're scooted back upstairs. And I remember that my sister and brother and I would, at some point when you could sense the party was quieting down, that we would sit at the top of the stairs and listen to my father, telling stories and cracking jokes. And for sure, that's a great memory of him, that I don't think either my sister or I were able to get that. We didn't inherit that part of him. But yes, I loved it, and then you just would hope you weren't going to get caught, sitting at the top. Especially because I'm sure, I don't remember it, but I'm sure there were things that we probably shouldn't be hearing.
Yeah.
be it a bawdy joke or whatever. But
Mhm.
so you didn't want to get caught. But it was like it gave you a different window into your parents.
Yeah.
Because they're your parents, and therefore
Mhm.
they are setting rules, and have expectations of you. But when you get to sort of see them in this other way, it's a window into what your future is as well, right? Because
Mhm.
you can't imagine what it means to be an adult when you're 8 years old or 10 years old. So those little moments kind of are pre-paving you to the future.
Mhm. And I know today as a community we still have like, cookouts and stuff, but just to hear like your story and some other people's stories of like their parents having the parties, and then it kind of transports me to like people talking about, oh yeah, we had Langston Hughes come. Like and so I'm just like, oh man, I wish we like, I'm sure parts of the country still do that version, but it's just like, man, I wish we still got together and just like, had those kind of things.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I do, even though I think of myself as certainly in periods of my life being rebellious and not wanting to, even today, like I would not wear black to a funeral. It just seems counterintuitive to me.
Mhm.
But those parties that my parents threw, people were dressed up. They came in cocktail dresses and their
Mhm.
little pumps and whatever. So I still enjoy that very much, looking for those. And sometimes be it that I'm looking through a magazine or a catalog or whatever, and I see a beautiful dress and I want it, but I'm like, but where am I going to wear that? Like, sort of, our world is so different now. So
Yeah.
sometimes I buy them anyway, and it's just like, well, one day I'm going to wear that thing. But and every so often, and like now we're coming towards the holidays, so there are likely to be one or two parties where you can actually, doll yourself up a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's a I, I really think that how you're imprinted as a child sticks with
Mhm.
you, which is one of the reasons I personally am glad that I wasn't brought up in a religion,
Mhm.
because I I see the strong pull that religion has,
Mhm.
and and that kind of is true of everything, that as a child you're being imprinted with these
Yeah.
various things, and when there's a
Mhm.
repetitive nature to it,
Mhm.
it really sticks with you.
Yeah.
So like me, with seeing my mother, in beautiful dresses and stuff, I still am attracted to that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that applies to religion. In terms of Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
I make Thanksgiving almost every year because I grew up with my parents making it. But then at some point, my mother was a working woman.
Mhm.
So to pull off Thanksgiving, it was an extra load for her.
Yeah.
And so at some point when I was 10 or 12, she said, if you want this, then you have to be a part of it. So we had to start cooking and participating in the whole thing. And again, it imprints.
Yeah.
So now I want to put on a beautiful Thanksgiving and have a
Mhm.
table of, this year it was 10 people. It's been as
Mhm.
many as 20.
Mhm.
Um, and it's but it's so ingrained in me because of
Yeah.
having done it for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would you say is your cultural makeup? And that's not to say your ethnicity, but what is the culture of where you grew up and the uniqueness of where you're from?
Hmm. Well, again, I would say, as I'm going to sort of go backwards and forwards and backwards.
Mhm.
I very much, one of the things I love about living in LA,
Mhm.
that fulfills a personal thing for me is living in a sort of multiracial space.
Mm-hmm.
I love, like in the summers, going over to the county museum for jazz night and looking at the huge diversity of people that come to that space. I
Mm-hmm.
love that,
Mm-hmm.
and really choose to live in that kind of a world.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel extremely fortunate that I grew up in basically a Black world.
Mm-hmm.
And that it anchored me in a certain way, I
Mm-hmm.
guess is the way I would put that. But it also meant that because of who my parents' friends were,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up around doctors and lawyers and judges, and even though at times that kind of middle class Black world felt very constraining to me in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
I still appreciate that I grew up around people who had achieved things.
Yeah.
And certainly that naturally fit with my personality, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you grow up in that, and it you could want to push away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways I did push away from it, and didn't follow that kind of path,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up on an artistic path, which, I can remember when I came to LA and I would visit my father, and he couldn't understand the nature of the freelance experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just thinking, well, almost like, who do you have to pay to make something happen or whatever, right? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
Daddy, it doesn't work that way. Um, though obviously networking, which is something he would have been good at,
Yeah.
is an important part of our experience. But I think I think growing up around those high achieving people definitely, again, imprinted on me,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess was simpatico probably with who I was anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That I want to. It's not important to me, like say, I wouldn't want to be an actor and people recognize you on the street and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But the idea that some of the projects I've worked on have brought joy to people, and that in the process of making those things, my high expectations of we're going to make this as good as we can make it,
Mm-hmm.
based on the budget and whatever the limitations might be, but that I have a high expectation of making a really good piece of entertainment.
Yeah.
I think that goes all the way back to being a kid and growing up around those people.
Mm-hmm. Um, what would you say is your favorite tradition from growing up?
Well, I would say two things come to mind. One is very, very often, so if not every Sunday, many, many Sundays, my father, who when I was a little kid, owned a bar and he owned a supper club.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would work late, like on a Saturday. He probably didn't get home until 4 a.m. on Sunday. And maybe he would be too wound up. So he would stay up, probably read the paper. He'd put on jazz on the phonograph, and he would make us breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd be up in the bed, and you would start to smell the potatoes and onions cooking. And he would make fried apples, and you'd smell the sweetness and the cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd all kind of come down bleary-eyed, and the breakfast would wake us up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a deeply embedded tradition and memory. And I think the other is Christmas morning.
Mm-hmm.
That as a child, uh, and that probably leans more on my mother. She would really go all out and make a wonderful Christmas for us. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I would say
Mm-hmm.
those are probably my two favorites.
Nice. How were you creative in your childhood, and then how did that lead you to attending Beloit and getting a degree in comparative literature?
You know, I think it's ironic because I remember just before I moved to LA,
Mm-hmm.
um, I knew I was going to be moving, so I had been waitressing, and I quit that, and I had a little bit of time so before I was going to leave, so I actually went and worked at a nursery school.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was not going to have children, and I thought this will be an interesting little thing just to have an experience with little kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the big thing I got out of it that tied back to my own childhood was that my mother, who was a teacher, but was so more academically focused, that she didn't encourage imagination and
Mm.
kind of exploring ourselves that way. And I know that particularly hurt my sister, because I think she really was more on that track, and they were constantly trying to pull her back to being academically oriented. Yeah, I think the sense of my parents' sensibilities were not at all creative. And again, most of their friends were people that were, in a sense, more business and, I'll call it academically driven than artistic, though there was a little hint of that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and until I was maybe 16, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I would have told you that from the time I was about 7.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, my sister always dreamed of being a movie star and was deep, deep, deep down that rabbit hole. And so my father would always, encourage his daughters in what they wanted. So he would say, Lynn's going to be a lawyer and Jill's going to be a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's ironic that I'm the one that ended up moving into the creative space.
Yeah.
And so when it's interesting how, like, I really look at it that you set yourself on a path, but you've got to be open to, like the detours. Here's a little road, you're on a road trip, and then there's like, where's that road take me?
Mm-hmm.
So can you be open to that? I probably, for what I thought I wanted to do, didn't pick the right school. But I did pick it because I had alternative way of thinking, and you could craft when you were there and when you weren't. So it drew me already. It was like pulling me away from, I'll call it the straight and narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got there, I realized, I don't know what I'm actually going to major in here. And I'm going to take what I want to take. And then when it was time to declare in my junior year, I literally was going through the catalog, and of course, skipping over the science, skipping over the, whatever, math.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in sort of the humanities section, and I come across this description of comparative literature, and I start reading it, and it's like, oh my God, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
I had been taking all the courses to be a comparative literature major, having never even heard that descriptive before.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. And it was very natural. And I feel like in some ways that was really great, a message from the universe to trust that, trust your instincts, follow your dream, etc. So that gave an emphasis to literature and foreign language. That's kind of the nexus of what comparative literature was, at least when I was going, attending school. And then when I came out, I still didn't know what I was going to do, but I kept sort of fantasizing, but not like right in my face fantasizing about being in the entertainment business. It was like, it was so beyond the scope of possibility, I think, is how I looked at it, that I wouldn't even allow it to be front and center in my mind. And then while I was back in Philly, I was waitressing. Through a friend, I met an astrologer. That woman did my chart, and she told me, you're a creative person and you're in denial. And it was literally like somebody pulled the cowl off. And, I felt my heart open up, and I knew that that was going to be my destiny.
Yeah.
So then once I get on that journey, I'm still constantly wrangling with that left brain person that has been so cultivated throughout my childhood. So so that therefore that it just gave it gave me an interesting journey of I'm sort of well balanced on both and right brained. And so it's led me on the journey I've been on.
Yeah, something I'm always telling people, like, even though I am a creative, before I found animation as a career, I was going to become an electrical engineer. So I feel like as an artist, my analytical keeps my creative in a prison.
Right, exactly.
And so it's just
and yet they often say that math and music are very much tied, right? So which makes sense because there is a rhyme to the reason to the rhyme. So yes, that's really well said. It's like the left brain stuff can really imprison you.
Because like the creative people, it's like exploration and discovery, and I'm like, even working with previous coworkers where they're like, they go into a program and they're like figuring it all out, and sometimes the way they do things is like, there's a tool for that, because the way I do it is like, oh, I don't know how to do this, Google. Like, Google will tell me. Right. I don't want to figure it out. Like, I want somebody else to tell me. So it's power in both ways, and I'm trying to learn more about the discovery, and like, particularly as an adult, like, how do I play and like in my learning journey and stuff.
Yes, I think, it sounds like you and I are having this experience. Yeah, you're right. Like, what's wrong with, and it's ironic because I say that to people a lot about, because again, how my left brain will like be looking to solve things. So I'll say to someone, why don't you explore A, B, and C? And their response is, well, no, I can only do A. I can't do all three at the same time. And it's like, why not? Right? Because let's say you're looking for a job, right? You don't look for one job. Spread yourself out there. You can always say no.
Right.
And if you didn't even go looking, you didn't even know there was that opportunity. So that's how lots of us imprison ourselves, right? That we think we can only do it in this very structured way. So I guess it speaks to, slowly I've been able to open myself up to, just throw the balls up in the air and, the right ones will drop down into your hand. Can you think that way? Um,
And I feel like in that, you know, I'm a overachiever of sort. I feel um like I did this educational program where you could get money to start something, and I was like, okay, well, on one side I want to do workshops and stuff on animation, but on the other side I want to provide curriculum. And they were like, oh, why don't you concentrate on one? And I'm just like, I can do both. Like I can easily do both, but other
right,
people might cannot do both. So they try to focus
right.
you, and I'm like, no, but I can do both at the
I
same time.
can
So,
do both. Yeah,
sometimes other people put limits on me because I can naturally do more than other people
right.
can.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And also just again how we think of things, right?
Mhm.
So if you're I'm making up the scenario, but if you're talking to someone about creating a program for their school or something,
Mhm.
that maybe because of how they think, they can't see the nexus of those two things. So it's like, no, you
Yeah.
have to stay in one box or the other, instead of, guess what, we could open up the world and these students could be learning how to do both things.
Yeah.
So it's a big dance.
Yeah.
It's the thing, I would say, over the past maybe 10 years, that's where I've tried to put my mind, is to free it.
Mhm.
Just trust that if I have my fantasies, they will manifest.
Yeah.
Don't think I have to have it all worked out. In fact, that's
Right.
not even my job to work it out. I'm just going to fantasize about it.
Yeah.
And it's a really great space to be in.
Mhm.
But I remember, uh, the absolute best example of how strong the left brain is, I don't know if you've ever taken it, but there's a class called, drawing on the right side of the brain.
I've heard of it.
And when I was co-directing Mulan 2
Mhm.
at Disney, Disney sponsored me to take that because
Mhm.
I don't draw.
Mhm.
And in fact, even in high school, I got a D in art, which to me was like kind of mean. Like, how could you give a non-artist a D? I did the assignments, like, at least give me a C. I tried, but I think that really emotionally hurt me,
Mhm.
right? And intimidated me. Yeah, I got a D in art, right? Um, so I take this drawing on the right side of the brain, and it's a 5-day course.
Mhm.
And, it's really well done, how it shows you. And some of the people in the class were painters, but
Mhm.
that's not the same as drawing, which I didn't even fully get that the subtlety of that difference. So they were trying to learn better how to draw.
Yeah.
And I was probably the worst student in the group. The teacher was so frustrated with me, like on day 3, because I just could not turn off my left brain. And the one thing that really helped, which they know, is where you do the thing where you turn a drawing
Mhm.
upside down. Now your
Mhm.
left brain is totally flummoxed, and you just have to repeat what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that helped me break through. And on the last day, you have to draw yourself, look in a mirror and draw yourself. And I have that drawing in my home,
Mhm.
and it looks like me. It's not an exact replica, but artists don't do exact replicas, right? That's
Yeah.
a unique aspect of art. But you can go, that's Lynne.
Mhm.
That's Lynne. Whereas on the first day, I literally just drew the single line and made some eyes, did the left brain version.
Yeah.
So it worked, but yes, I could see how I was in the box, and
Yeah.
how I couldn't break myself out of it. Eventually I did.
Yeah.
Um, but um, yeah, it's a great example
Mhm.
of that dichotomy.
I think another similarity when you talked about somewhere where you were like scared of getting stuck in Philadelphia? I remember going to school in Rochester, New York. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember like because I'm in a sorority, I'm a Zeta, and so my sorority sisters, some of them in the graduate chapter, were like, "Yeah, I went to RIT, and I thought I was gonna like just be here a little bit, but then 10 years later, and I'm just like, not me. Like, I will live under a bridge somewhere before I
Yeah.
will stay in Rochester."
Yes. Yes. First of all,
So
it's so damn cold up there.
yes, so I remember that like I just saw like some of them got stuck, and I was
Yes.
like, I don't want to get stuck.
I don't want to get stuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even when I came to LA, I thought to myself, I'm going to go and try to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And if in 10 years I haven't, it isn't, I haven't made a pathway, then that's still enough time for me to leave and go do something else.
Yeah.
You know, and even though again the freelance experience is challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and there have definitely been low points,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I guess the hunger, the the drive was still there, so you know I'm still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So this part, I list out some of your projects. I won't list everyone, but it's just so the audience can know some of our favorite things were worked on by Black people. So I mean, of course, you know, Bebe's Kids. You were editor, and then you were so opinionated that you became an associate producer on Bebe's Kids. And then you worked on an all-black editing team with Angela Robinson and Armetta Hamlet. For me, you worked on Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit. That's like a monumental movie from my childhood.
Wow.
Like, I've always wanted to recreate the like competition scene. Like,
Mm.
and actually, somebody I follow on social media, he has a series and he posts snippets from the series. And this girl just like sung that scene where they're singing,
Ah.
and I was like, and it's just like, I guess for like millennials, it's just like, yes, come and join the chorus. So, happily ever after, fairy tales for every child. You're editor and producer, line producer on Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, editor on The Road to El Dorado. I know you said you had a short stint on that. A creative producer and showrunner for an extremely goofy
Goofy movie.
movie, Aristocats 2, and Monster High Properties and Enchantimals Properties,
Mm-hmm.
co-director on Mulan 2, director on Super Sema, amongst other things. You did live action as well. So, how do you feel about your career?
You know, it, like I said, it certainly had its bumpy parts to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting to look back and see, you know, the opportunities that I did get, and that people like right now, for some reason, Extremely Goofy Movie is like super hot. Somebody told me it's all over Twitter or something. Like people are talking, and I'm like, really? So maybe it just speaks to millennials, you know, kind of
Mm-hmm.
in that part of your
Mm-hmm.
lives where you're looking back at all those things that affected you as kids.
You know what
But
it might be? Um, Atlanta, the TV show Atlanta
well,
just had big.
Atlanta did the thing,
So
yeah.
maybe people then they're like, oh, let me go
Right.
watch
Oh
all the
my God,
movies.
yeah, maybe that is what triggered it, you know. But
Yeah.
even that, like, what made them want to, you know,
Yeah.
focus on that is also funny. But yes, I watched that. It was very cool. What was it? The blackest movie ever made, or something like
Yeah. And millennials really think like we commandeered because you know, growing up with no real representation, we're like, oh yeah, the green guy from Doug is black.
that.
Goofy movie is black. Like,
Yeah, we're trying to grab onto anything we can, right?
yeah. So
Um, so it's but it's nice to have, nice isn't even the right word, you know, it's great to look back and see that, um, I've been able to play my own part
Mm-hmm.
in, expanding the the library of,
Mm-hmm.
entertainment that features people of color.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, and to have enjoyed working on them, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like they're great memories. And you know, getting to, I did both, the fairy tales and Bebe's Kids with Bruce Smith, you
Mm-hmm.
know, sort of, you know, at the beginning of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's a great person to work with, makes you laugh a lot. And so it was enjoyable on many levels. You know,
Yeah.
the fairy tales had that magical aspect of, in that first season, we worked with, you know, like just like the cream of the crop of, uh, people of color, you know, actors, opera singers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was an amazing, amazing opportunity to, you
Yeah.
know, sit in the booth and work with all these people. Um, it's great to see that. And I knew when I came here that, I wanted to be an editor.
Mm-hmm.
And and I and that, so in a sense I put myself into the creative space,
Mm-hmm.
um, without fully even understanding what all that meant, because I didn't really know this business.
Yeah.
But I felt that that was a place where you get to craft the storytelling, which is exactly what it is. And a great, leaping off place for understanding the, you know, like that's the goal. We're here telling stories. And in editorial is where you're learning how to take all those pieces and
Mm-hmm.
craft it into a story. Because even though, yes, obviously, for most storytelling, certainly in the narrative space, it begins with a script. So, you know, I have huge, huge respect for writers, and, you know, the ideas that birth out of them. But the nature of both, stage and film is it keeps evolving after those initial words get put on paper. You know, in theater they just keep reworking it and reworking it and reworking it until it, you know, if they're lucky, it ends up on Broadway, let's
Yeah.
say. But for us, it's the same thing. In film, you start with that script, and especially, I mean, it's true in live action as well, but in animation, you know, as it moves through each group, so as you design it, it's like then the ideas expand,
Yeah.
and can then affect what's on the page. And then obviously when you're storyboarding, what the imagination of those artists bring to it, bring new ideas, expand on what the writers have done.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and if you're lucky at the end, you've got something wonderful that people want to see. And what's great, again, in looking back, is to have worked on things that people still want to see.
Yeah.
That's the really special thing. And I'm someone who watches things over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I have my, you know, the things that I like to do that with. So to be part of having made something that other people, that's on their top 10 list, is
Mm-hmm.
pretty wonderful.
Yeah. um with your the many like roles that you've had, I know for me, um professionally, I'm a 3D modeler, but on uh, at 6 Point, I started in production in January, and then I transitioned to an assistant editor, and
Mm-hmm.
so unexpectedly it's like it makes me feel more comfortable to have three skill sets instead of
Mm-hmm.
one,
Mm-hmm.
because 3D modeling is very competitive, but also to be in the world where you have to go project to project, it makes me feel much more comfortable about living in LA, that I have more things that I can apply for.
Right. Got it. Yes. Yeah.
And
And,
so yeah.
and you may find that, it one thing just leads you to another thing,
Mhm.
and and then some of it is, what are you aspiring to?
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's like I'm I'm taking this detour, but it's going to take me further along the path that I want it to go, so
Mhm.
it's a dance, right?
Yeah.
And some
So
people are able to just, like, they know what they are and they get on that path and they can
mhm.
go. But there's nothing wrong with it being kind of a squiggly line that gets you
Yeah. What would you say is your biggest breakthrough in your career, or have you had multiple breakthroughs?
I feel like the biggest breakthrough for me, and yes, there probably have been, it's all, again, it's a road and you just keep
Mm-hmm.
moving along it. But I think the biggest thing was is constantly remembering to get out of your own way
Mm.
and trust your instincts. I've had experiences where I didn't trust my instinct and it went very badly
Mm-hmm.
and was extremely painful. And I would say on one of those, I didn't realize that I had made the wrong choice. In the last time I did it, I knew in the moment I shouldn't do it. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
how people say they're walking down the aisle and they know they shouldn't marry that person, but everybody's here, I have to do it. Like, and in that way, it was also, that was that was the most money I had ever been offered. I mean, on
Mm.
a, like, much more money.
Yeah.
And I got lured by that, even though I knew it was not going to be good for me.
Yeah.
And it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And but the lesson I learned was, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
I am going to, when the bells are going off, listen. So that's a breakthrough. Fully, like that, I won't make that mistake again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge breakthrough. And I would say the other is, the other big great breakthrough for me has been to fully own, and own isn't even the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
to fully embrace and surround myself in gratitude.
Okay.
That, and my tattoo is the symbol for gratitude.
Nice.
That's how much of a breakthrough that has been for me,
Mm-hmm.
to fully appreciate every little thing
Mm-hmm.
that it encompasses my life, to be able to just stop and, look at the beautiful trees. I'm on my walk in the morning and just
Yeah.
appreciate the beautiful neighborhood I live in, to appreciate my cat sitting on my chest and
Mm-hmm.
purring, to appreciate all the wonderful, talented people I'm working with,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just keep building on that. Um, that has been, that I can tell you very specifically that, I guess it was maybe about 6 years ago, no more, maybe eight
Mm-hmm.
years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a year of gratitude. This
Mm.
was
I
a
saw that
major shift
picture.
for me. Oh, you saw the picture? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I gave myself no limits on it, right? Like you can, if you only have to do one a day, and I cut strips of colored construction paper, and I only had to do one. But once I got going, I would do 20 or 30 in a day. And then I looped them together and made a chain. And that chain went all the way through my home by the end of the year. And that so that I could just appreciate, you know, I love the beautiful wood floors. It didn't have to be anything monumental.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. It changed my life. So I would say that's the biggest personal breakthrough. And to just let that be the boat I'm floating on.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like as a millennial, it was like our adulthood was all like hustle, hustle, hustle culture. Do a side hustle because I graduated college in 2008, which was a horrible time to become an adult.
Yeah.
And so it's just like you're never we can't buy houses, we can't buy cars. I say this theory of like people think we're still in childhood, like we wear like these cartoon things, and even if we're not in the animation industry, and it's like we have to find joy somewhere. We can't buy a house. We can't go on vacation sometimes.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe your joy doesn't look like what your parents' joy looked like, right? Create your own.
Yeah.
That was the opportunity given by all the screwed up mess that, the generations before you left you.
And so we are always striving for more and don't have time to be grateful for like our accomplishments. And then now I'm trying to be in a space where I feel like there's I don't know, as an American, it's just like so much concentration on doing, and it's like you can be and still be a viable person.
That's right. Exactly. You can just be.
Yeah. You don't have to do anything to earn respect, particularly as a marginalized person, where it's like Black people have to be perfect to earn respect from white people, and it's like, no, you don't. No. You don't.
Yeah. And do you need respect from white people? Right.
Yeah.
You certainly, it comes down to you need to, if respect is the right word for it, you need to gain the confidence of individuals, someone who is a gatekeeper to something you might want. Yes. Yeah. And, but maybe it's better to look at it that way than to even be looking at it from like a white black thing. Yeah. Again, I feel like that a box we're keeping ourselves in. Because it does work both ways, that someone might be wanting to put you in a box, but are you allowing yourself to be in the box? And I'm not saying that naively. Like, of course, there are situations that where you could be endangered or whatever. But I'm saying at a sort of metaphysical level, do we stop and look at our lives as how are we shaping it? How are we showing the world, the universe, that we're ready for what we say we're ready for?
Yeah.
It's not that it isn't just talk, and it isn't. And again, yes, it's about doing, but it's more about thinking. What am I thinking about myself and what I want? And do I believe I can do it? Or is it fantasy that I'm also going, but you can't do that? Right? Because every time you're saying, but I can't, you just put yourself in the box.
Yeah.
You have to believe you can. And you look at the people who have had mega careers in whatever part of the world they might be accomplished in. They did that in many cases, despite all kinds of hardships, so, and even think about Little Richard
Mm-hmm.
in a homophobic world.
Mm-hmm.
Look what Little Richard did.
Yeah.
Like, how did he do that? But he did.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows you, like, if you just go, I'm not being put in that box.
Yeah.
You can create all kinds of things. You can almost create a myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about that in terms of, like, again, maybe not so much Little Richard, but like Johnny Mathis. I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
dating myself, but like Johnny Mathis, a gay guy who had women swooning for him.
Mm-hmm.
Rock Hudson. Now, Rock Hudson wasn't as obvious as Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Mathis to me,
Mm-hmm.
but again, people creating the world that they wanted to create. Colin Powell,
Mm-hmm.
a kid from the Bronx or whatever,
Right.
eventually becomes, what was he, Secretary of Defense or
Yeah.
whatever,
I have to finish his book. It just
but
has so many
it's
chapters.
like, yeah, look at the people, and some of whom we might hold weird feelings about
Mm-hmm.
what they did, but they had to fight a lot of shit,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they didn't always make the right choices, but they
Mm-hmm.
were able to make their dream happen.
Yeah.
And they are our progenitors, right? They led the way for you and I to be able to work in this business. Whoever, Sammy Davis,
Yeah.
Hattie McDaniel,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm just names that are just popping into my head.
Yeah.
However we may look at what they did,
That been fetching.
they paved a path for us,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have to keep paving the path.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's nice to be in that place of, well, I helped carve out a little bit of space. And so when we met at the Great Day in animation photo, that to stand there, I said to somebody that day, like, look, there's enough of us to take this photo.
Yeah.
That wasn't true 30 years ago.
And there was a lot of people missing.
And there were a lot of people missing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know they were doing exactly the same number.
Mm-hmm.
But if we did our own thing, it might be twice as big as that now.
Right.
But 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
it was tiny.
Yeah.
So you look at that photo and it's like every single one of us is helping to open the path, open the door,
Right.
let more people in. It happens to be a really great time right now where, there's an energy of inclusiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and it's wonderful. It's wonderful because that has not always been the case.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're flooding in a lot of people of color, and it'll all shake out in various ways. Everybody's not going to become a great director or a movie star or whatever, but can they make a living in this business?
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself, right? Can you raise a family if that's what you want to do, working in this business? So yeah, it's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, something I thought of from earlier. So from part of my career, well, most of my adult career being in the South, I definitely endured like racism and sexism, but there was a point where like I advocated for myself at first, and then I got tired and stopped advocating for myself, and so there was this feeling of, oh man, this stuff is happening to me, and there was something where I just started advocating for myself again, and it was just like like my boss at the time was like, oh, okay, sure. And I'm like, wait, how much of this stuff has been happening and it didn't have to happen?
Right.
Like because I was definitely enduring the isms,
Yes,
but all of it didn't have to be.
that's right. Exactly.
And I was like, how many of the like 2 of the 5 years did I like endure things that I did not have to endure?
That's right.
Because I
Exactly.
did not advocate for
Because
myself.
of my own mindset,
Yeah.
right? Just because of how I was looking at something. So if I can
Mm-hmm.
just like turn the camera slightly, could I see it differently?
Yeah.
Um, and would that be more to my advantage
Mm-hmm.
to do that, right? Like again, we could get stuck that we think the box can only be like this, but what if I move the box over here?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I get a different perspective and therefore a different way of seeing things that can open a door for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it. I know for myself. My husband is a real. He has a certain kind of gentleness
Mm-hmm.
when he talks with people that puts people at ease, and I've watched him grow into that person and
Mm-hmm.
how it has expanded things for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it in that way, it's sort of besides whatever we're striving for in our career,
Yeah.
just sort of how are we allowing ourselves to continue to grow as a human being,
Yes.
and and not because if I do that, then this, but
Yeah.
just, why would we think we would just stay as we were when we were 20 or 30 or whatever? We're, just like our bodies are changing, our minds
Mm-hmm.
it's elastic. We can keep expanding it, and we can let go of thoughts, ways of being that
Right.
well, I've always been that. Okay. And how's that been going for you? Maybe if you change it,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm constantly thinking about those things,
Yeah.
and when you have like a negative interaction, I'll call it, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's always easy to blame the other person, but of course you're part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
what was your part? You
Mm-hmm.
know, that has been another, way of changing how I'm seeing
Yeah.
myself and seeing the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm proof positive of the ability of growth because I posted recently on my Instagram where my kindergarten progress report was like, she's smart, but she doesn't talk. And that pretty much
Mm,
was like till high school. Like I didn't really talk like that. And so college I actually purposely like, okay, let me learn how to string 2 sentences together, and now like for my what 12-year-old self to be like, oh, you're gonna have a YouTube channel? What?
right.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're gonna
That's not
like
going to
be
happen.
able to hold a conversation?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Bravo.
Yeah, so and then I did Toastmasters and got best speaker. Like,
Oh
what?
my goodness.
I'm a good speaker now. Not only do I talk, but I talk well.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I
Yeah,
would be
so I was
way
like,
intimidated to do Toastmasters. Yikes.
yeah. So I'm proof positive like there can be that pulse like growth. I always say you don't have to rely on your default factory settings. Like
That's right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. To put it in modern terms. Yes. That's exactly right. Yeah.
upgrade, upgrade.
Upgrade. Upgrade. Yeah. Software upgrade. Yeah. You can do it.
So
Totally.
can you talk about how did you initially transition from live action to animation?
Um, it was just, in a sense, it's just the magic of life in some ways. But yeah, I was working on Throw Mama from the Train
Mm-hmm.
and became friendly with the composer, David Newman, and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And at one of their parties, I met their dear friend, friends, Tom Wilhite and Willard Carroll,
Mm-hmm.
who owned a little animation studio. In fact, Tom, I believe, had been like the head of Disney. I'm always unsure of exactly what it was, but
Yeah.
he was running Disney when they did Tron.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then when he left, the original Disney was Hyperion.
Yeah.
And they had been developing, like they were going to do another like spin-off label of Disney and call it Hyperion. So they had done all this work on it, and then they decided not to do it. So when Tom left, he asked, could he have that? And he named his studio Hyperion.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were doing, Willard would also wrote, he was a writer, he would write live action. So eventually they asked me to edit a live action movie of theirs that they were producing, that
Mm-hmm.
Willard directed, called The Runestone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked with them on that. And then at some point, they were hooked up with Paramount and the Hudlins
Mm-hmm.
to do Bebe's Kids, and they asked me if I would come be the editor on that. And
Nice.
it was like, I don't know, but okay, I'll give it a try,
Yeah.
And it just sort of it just feels like destiny pulled me there.
Yeah. So that live action thing that you did edited for them, did that for free, right? Or was that the one you did for free, or
No, I
was it?
got paid for that. I got
Okay.
paid for that. Yes.
Okay.
No, I did two AFI shorts that I did
Mm-hmm.
for free, one of which
Mm-hmm.
won an Oscar.
Oh, nice.
Mhm. In 1982, it won the Oscar for Best Live
Mm-hmm.
Action Short. So those I did for free. I would work on the one that won the Oscar. I had a paying job, and then at night I would go to AFI
Mm-hmm.
and work on that, and on the weekends for like 9 months.
Yeah. So something I want to talk about is, okay, like partly the importance of networking, but also I feel like because I had a journey in my 20s of like, I'm a hard worker. My hard work will get me places. And then I had a breakthrough and was like, oh, okay, if I tell my network, because I had a network, I just didn't use it. And so if I tell my network certain things, it's some of it will happen. So I see the power of network, 10 years later or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
But also in this space where we have so much access to technology and stuff, and we can create so much, I feel like particularly in the Black community, which is understandable because of our history, we're really concentrated on getting paid for things,
hmm
but there's power in doing things for free. So can
yes,
you talk about the combination of the importance of networking and possibly doing things for free?
yes. I think especially if you're trying to, if you're aspiring to something,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have any way of demonstrating that you're ready to do it, then you need to find a way to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you might write a short film and
Yeah.
try to find people to work with to get it made, right? And all those people might need to do that. You don't have money to make it, so you're going to have as many people work for free as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, but all of those people, then one would think, is looking at that as, this is an opportunity for me to, one, develop my own skills further. I'll be able to have my name on that project. It'll get seen, hopefully. And even if it never got seen, you could still show it to people. It's
Right.
still a legitimate credit that you earned, and you earned skill from it, right? You increase your skill. So I think, especially when you're young, you should make space for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't do it willy-nilly. you know, like I did it. Well, I actually did it a number of times. Part of the reason I was able to do that, because I did one where I wasn't working at all.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't earning any money, but my mother died when I was 26.
Mm-hmm.
And so she left me a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that little bit of money helped me to be able to just try to, like, I would do a little bit of temp work here and there, but I could pay my rent, which of course was way lower than it is now. And so I worked on a guy's little horror picture, total piece of crap. I will not name it. And the way he paid me was he took me to lunch every day.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally would just go to like Lucy's El Adobe across from Paramount. So it wasn't, you know, he didn't spend a lot of money, but I got a free lunch
Mm-hmm.
and we would work on his film.
Yeah.
And I got to learn more about being an editor.
Yeah.
So I saw the value in that. It was like I was going to college again in some ways, but very specifically. So yeah, I'm a big believer in if you want to prove yourself in an area, like nobody's just going to say, yeah, now you can direct just because I like you. No, you've got to show them that you can. So what, how do you say that, you know, where, you know, what's the pudding, what's the cake you made that shows me that you know how to make a cake? Right? I'm a baker. Oh, okay.
Where are the pictures of your cakes? I don't have any.
Show me something. Yeah. Oh, it's all in my head. Oh, okay. You know, or I'm going to learn how to do that when you give me a job. And it's like, no, I want to know that you have some sensibility for it in advance of giving you an opportunity. Right. So yes, you have to, it's sort of like you have to invest in yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, so yes, you have to put yourself out a little bit, you know, and you're not getting paid, but you have to find that balance. So you have a job that pays for your rent and you can eat and whatever. And then, you know, you can say what time you have available to do something. But yes, you have to invest in yourself.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's been interesting. I've had a number of conversations. I have a niece who is graduating from high school, and she can draw for sure, but she's kind of still figuring things out. And I put her in touch with a few artists just to see how they would encourage her. Mm-hmm. And a number of them said, like, they would advise not going to art school. Mm-hmm. That they feel like if you're a self-starter, there is so much available to you on the internet, and there are groups and whatever. And so you could save that $60,000 a year and not go into debt. Right. And you can learn what you need to learn and develop a community network. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and keep developing your skills, blah, blah, blah. And I was very taken with that because you know, when I came into the business, film school wasn't really fully a thing yet. Mm-hmm. Yes, they existed, but, you know, a lot of people, you just come and you're making your way. Yeah. And of course, if you went to a school then you could use that. Like somebody else went to Emerson. Okay, let's talk, you know, like the networking that way. Mm-hmm. But but you didn't have to go to Emerson for film. You could have been there for something else, right? Yeah. But the camaraderie was enough. So I always looked at it like I didn't go to film school. Film school was me actually out there building my career. Yeah. So therefore, sometimes you have to do some free stuff as a way to keep developing.
Yeah. Um, Funny enough, like at the Great Day in Animation photo shoot, okay, so I recently came out with a my most recent video on my channel is called Authentic Networking, and
Mm-hmm.
so, with a lot of people my age and younger in the animation industry having trouble with the networking thing, I thought I would make a video about it. But funny enough, at that photo shoot, I'm like, well, first of all, like I feel like all the older people who have been in the industry together, there was this like reunion of like, hey, oh, I hadn't seen you in so long. But I, as a younger person, had the same experience because I had interviewed half of them on my YouTube channel.
Right, right,
So
right,
it
right,
was
right,
just me
right,
meeting these people in person, like, oh, hey,
right,
hey, hey, hey.
right.
And then I, in my internally in my head, I'm like, I am in this space with all these people, and the other half, I need to get their contact information so I can have them on
Yeah, I
YouTube
can
channel.
interview them too. Yeah.
And so the whole time I'm like trying to talk to people because part of in my authentic networking video is like stop making stuff so transactional and like have a human experience.
Yes.
So I'm trying to balance like having this human experience with everybody, but also trying to get to everybody to get their contact. So I'm not trying to seem like I'm like bouncing around like, hey, 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 hey. I'm like, okay, let me stay here for a bit, talk.
Right, 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 right.
But I
Yes.
need to get to everybody.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like this, that's my analytical part where it's like this funny balance internally in my head where I'm like, be a human, but get to everybody.
Right.
Cause like
And
how often are you gonna be in this space?
maybe the shift is because it is important, the human part, but it's like if I can get to half of the people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in the end, you'll have other opportunities. So it's like I don't have to get to everybody today.
Yeah.
That's a nice little goal, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more important that I actually connect with people.
Yeah.
So if I only connect to 5, that's better than if I spread myself over
Right.
25 and nobody actually even remembers me because I was
Right.
zip, 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 you know.
What do you feel is like the importance of having like different cultures and perspectives working on a production? I remember you had mentioned like on Happily Ever After, like somebody calling out a pagoda. like, like, what's the
That's
importance?
right.
Do you feel?
Yes. I mean, I think that, it's kind of, in some ways, it's self-evident. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I don't know if you saw, recently I saw an article somewhere about, there was a show, hey, buddy, there was a show in Canada. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember what it was called, but it ran for, I think, 5 seasons, hugely successful. And I believe it was about a Korean, yes, a Korean family that had a grocery store. That was the basic of the sitcom.
Oh, convenience something.
Yeah, I
I know
can't
what you're talking about.
remember. But this article was about the show was
Or
ending.
might was it like Life Off the Boat or
No, no,
no?
no. It's more like convenience
Okay,
in
okay.
the
Yeah,
title. But it was highly successful in Canada.
yeah.
And now it was coming to an end. And now that it was ending, it appears, and also just because of where, in our woke time,
Mm-hmm.
the one of the leads of the show
Mm-hmm.
was kind of spilling the beans about what an awful experience it had
Yes, I
been
remember that.
because all of the writers were white
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't consult with the actors about stuff. So it was only when the actors would raise a question did anything get re-examined.
Yeah.
And she gave the example of, in one of the last episodes, somebody gets sick, a customer,
Mm-hmm.
and the writers have it that they got sick from eating, maybe it was like homemade kimchi at the
Mm-hmm.
store.
Mm-hmm.
And the actors had to come to the writers and say, listen, you got this all wrong. Like, kimchi is a probiotic,
Right.
therefore it can't make you sick. So you need to come up with something else. And I
Right.
believe, I may be misstating this, but I believe there was some resistance to, like, that the Korean actors knew better than the writers what was reality. They did change it. But
Yeah.
that was just an example of what they had experienced, and that nowhere along the line did they ever bring in any Korean writers,
Right.
or even a cultural consultant, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not a writer, do you have somebody to double check? And the show I'm show running right now,
Mm-hmm.
that I can't talk about,
Mm-hmm.
um, has a lot of multicultural aspects to it, and we have a consultant.
Yeah.
Besides having a multiracial group of people, on the production,
Mm-hmm.
we have someone specifically to help us with this aspect, because they can't make us do anything. They're just making us aware, like,
Yeah.
this is all good, or you might want to look at this, or you could enhance this by doing this, or
Mm-hmm.
they're just offering up suggestions, that will make our show better.
Yes.
So it was an interesting example that even in 2022, that show had still not bothered to do that. Was
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But it it makes me remember, when I was an assistant editor on uh, a early cable, I guess you'd call it a movie, and it was about the Chicago 8, during the Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm.
big trial held in Chicago. And when we went, it was actually sort of shot on video. So we were in an online bay putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
And the director was still actively trying to figure out how, because he had the real people and then actors playing them.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we had interviews with, I think, maybe one of them had died. All of the rest were still alive. So he had interviewed them. And so he interviewed Bobby Seale,
Mm-hmm.
and finds out, who he was and all that. And long interview, but he's looking for that piece that sets up. So at the beginning, here's Bobby Seale.
Yeah.
And he's trying to decide what piece to use. And he's about to put in this part where Bobby Seale talks about, we found out, this is now he is in the Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that California has open carry.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided we're going to open carry. So that's how he was going to introduce Bobby Seale in this story.
Right.
And I'm just the measly assistant editor. And I'm like, I'm sweating, I'm nervous. I'm just like, oh my God, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. This is so wrong.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it was, Jeremy Kagan was the director. He was a big director at the time. And I just thought, I have to do it. I'm the only Black person in the room. I gotta say something.
Mm-hmm.
So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that, this is your introduction to this man. He is more than that piece.
Right.
He was he had been like I forget what it was. Maybe like he worked on what do you call that? The line when you're building cars, like
the assembly line.
Worker. He was something like that. Like,
mm-hmm.
To me, that's far more interesting, that he was just a working class person who suddenly became, a activist.
Right.
To me, that's way more interesting, and what a lot of people wouldn't know about him.
Yes.
And so I debated it with him. He changed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real affirmation in, as hard as it might be, speak up.
Yes. Because there's a lot of things that come out where it's like, was anybody in the room?
Yeah.
And sometimes people are in the room, but they're afraid to talk.
They're afraid to talk. Yeah. So it's encouraging people to speak up. You don't have to take their suggestion,
mm-hmm.
but at least by it being put in the room, you had an opportunity to think about it another way.
Yeah.
So it's critical, and being, obviously being both a person of color and a woman,
Mm-hmm.
even still today, these are still challenging moments for us.
Mm-hmm.
And all you can hope is you're seeing other people standing up like that. That was the true beauty of the Me Too thing, was
Mm-hmm.
all these women who have experienced abuse in one form or another standing up, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, you know letting the young women behind us
Mm-hmm.
know, you've got to fight for this, you've got to stand up for yourself, you've got to call that person out.
Right.
I had an experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Me Too where, when I first got in the union
Mm-hmm.
as an editor, and I was actually in the shipping room at what was then Lorimar, what is now Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And I had only been there 3 weeks. I was like rolling film or something, and one of the sound editors, everybody would come in to get coffee,
Mm-hmm.
walk by me, and he slapped me on the ass and said, "Good morning." And I was just horrified. I was ready to turn around and put my fist in his face.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught myself and I thought, you've only been here 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He's been here for 20 years.
Right.
Who do you think is going to get hurt by this?
Yeah.
And I held it, and I just made sure I never had my back to him again.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I could do in that moment, because I
Right.
knew I wouldn't be protected,
Yeah.
and my career was more important in that moment. But hopefully now we are, with enough women having stood up and enough businesses knowing they better protect themselves in a different way,
Yeah.
you can go in and you can express these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's true across the board. Yes, speak up, and it doesn't matter whether you're a person of color, or you could just be a white woman, you can be a white guy, anybody. If you have ideas that might affect the end product, you should speak up. And sometimes maybe it's not speaking up in the room. Maybe you quietly, after the meeting, you go to someone and you let them know, listen, I'm concerned about this or that.
Mm-hmm.
But you should make sure, if you have concerns, you should voice them.
Yeah. There's people who have known since they were children that they wanted to be in animation and are still on that journey. As a person who didn't know specifically what you wanted to do at first, how have you navigated through the so many roles in the animation industry, and how have you convinced people of your skills and to give you like those chances?
I would say, like I said earlier, some of it is almost like you're fantasizing about what you want,
Mm-hmm.
and you are going to get slapped down. Like, I've had people that's like, why would I give you that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one, I think you have to, again, you keep amassing your skills, you keep believing in yourself, and then I think it's not about convincing people, it's about embodying it,
Mm-hmm.
and people will see it. So I got the opportunity to co-direct Mulan 2 because of the kind of producer I was. Because of having come from editorial, I was used to creatively thinking about what the end product can be.
Yeah.
So I didn't turn that off, and I wasn't expected to turn it off, but I would say perhaps versus some of the other, because in that time of doing those DVDs, movies at Disney, the producers were the full-on producers. So you had to manage your budget and all that, and schedule, but you also were there to partner with the director.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps because of my background as an editor, I more naturally insinuated myself more in the creative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, the woman who was the head of the division at the time, Sharon Morrill, um, she saw that,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore then said, "I'm going to give you this opportunity." So I didn't ask her for it,
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
but I had demonstrated in the meetings that we had, because you know how animation is, in terms of movies. You mount it and then you see where it's not working and you have to
Mm-hmm.
go back in, and that might mean rewriting. In uh, Extremely Goofy movie, we mounted it, I believe, twice before we ended up with the movie that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, we had to look at things and do we rearrange, and is this the right way to tell this story? And I was in those meetings, and she saw how my mind worked. She
Yeah.
saw how, when we worked with the editor, how that was. So I think she saw something. She saw this person deserves this opportunity.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like trying to sell myself to her.
Yeah. Something you said about helping your sense of direction, both in real life and in life, is to boldly tell people what you're going to do. That seems like a lot of vulnerability and sounds scary. So, what is the benefit you've seen from the practice?
I just look at it that it's even when you're more like when you're saying it to someone else, you're really just saying it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So and so yes, it can be crushing that somebody, the person you said it to, is like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but you
But
have to just
also,
scream.
some people keep it inside to not be held accountable.
That's right.
So that's the
Exactly.
scary part of like, if you say it out loud, it's real.
That's right. And yeah, so I mean, my friends, they're so they put up with so much because I'm always like, well, right now I'm not eating dairy, or now I've been gluten free for 10 years now. At least
Mm-hmm.
that's a long run, right? Um, uh, so different stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm only doing goat cheese, let's say, or whatever, right? So then I go to somebody's house and they make sure there's only goat cheese, or they make sure at least there's one goat cheese among the other things.
Uh-huh.
um, but part of the announcing of it is for me to now I am accountable because I told you that.
Mm-hmm.
So now when I come to your house, I can't eat that other thing that I told you, you just reorchestrated because of me and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've done that kind of forever.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a teenager and a face full of zits, I gave up chocolate for Lent, which again, I wasn't brought up religious, but I looked at it like that's a 6-week period, a nice finite little box I can put myself in.
Mm-hmm.
And I would give up chocolate
Mm-hmm.
for that period. And that was the first of then a lifetime of this time I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that. And,
Uh-huh.
um, so, I mean, that's one of the basic ways I really do that. In terms of like my career, I think, what a better example would be that I wrote a couple of novels,
Mm-hmm.
neither of which have been published. But when I started doing it, and I went to a couple writers' conferences and stuff like that, and I realized that it was important for me to say I'm a writer, I'm an
Mm-hmm.
author,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you're kind of pretending something. Like,
Yeah.
you don't believe it. Just because you're not published doesn't mean you're not an author.
Right.
And so part of that is taking ownership again, taking what was the word you used?
Accountability.
Accountability for myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in that same way, like after I did Mulan 2, I mean, I didn't get to direct for a long time. And I felt like there was a real prejudice of, because I don't draw, I can't be a director. And I heard that while I was directing it. From some people. But I never stopped calling myself a director because I wasn't getting work as it. Right? I'm still a director. And in that case, I've proven I'm a director.
Yeah.
Just because I wasn't able to get work doesn't mean, that doesn't diminish what I've accomplished.
Yeah.
You know? So, and in fact, now, like, it's funny because I have like a business card, even though why does anybody need a business card anymore? But when I went to sort of identify myself, I actually put storyteller. Because that encompasses all of it.
Yeah.
I'm a storyteller. And I do that in different forms at different times, different jobs at different projects. But in the end, it's all storytelling.
Yeah. When you mentioned the director piece, how you hadn't worked as a director, I just watched a new interview. Is it Variety? Angela Bassett and Keke Palmer are in conversation, and Angela Bassett was talking. Well, she hasn't got, unfortunately, crazily enough, she hasn't gotten an Oscar. Abomination, but she was talking about how sometimes when people get Oscars, they're like, oh, now I have to be the number one person on the call sheet. Like, I can't be a supporting actor. And so I could see somebody being like, oh, I've been a director. Now I have to just be a director.
Right. Yes. And, you know, the other part of it, not that, just as a side note, is survival. Like you said, if you have multiple skills, why not make use of them?
Yeah.
If it feels good to you, you know. Yeah, I mean, and I remember years ago that people would say to me, like, do you miss editing? And I said, I've never stopped editing. If I'm producing, I work with the editor. If I'm directing, I work with the editor. So I still get to do that. I just don't push the buttons.
Right.
So it all comes with me. It's all in the bag that I'm carrying, right? So I just keep expanding. I don't have to just do that one thing anymore.
Yeah. And then quickly, when you talked about saying it out loud and the person having the goat cheese at their gathering, I'm like, oh, so you're building a community of people to help you.
Yes. Yes, exactly. To help keep me on my path.
Yeah, so it's not even only like, oh, I might not do it, but they're supporting you and be like, oh, since you are doing it, here you go.
And you know what? In terms of career, what's interesting about that is, whatever, let's say, you know, that one says, I'm an author. If you sense that there are people around you who don't believe that about you, maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the other part of it, right? Is you don't want doubters around you. You want people who believe in you. And that doesn't mean that you've had to prove anything to them. It might just be they support you. It's almost like, you know, the classic great mom, you know, who just supports you no matter what. Yeah. Like you want friends like that, right? Who are wishing for your success rather than whispering, you know, oh my God, now she thinks this, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe those people aren't the right people to have around you, because they are, if your thoughts are attracting the energy of success, then you want to make sure you're not attracting energy that is pulling you away from success, right? Yeah. So that could be manifested by, are there friends who are naysayers?
Yeah.
then maybe they're not really friends,
Yeah.
and of course, it doesn't mean you have to jettison them completely,
Yeah.
but they're not the people. One, maybe you don't want to share certain things with them.
Mm-hmm.
Two, maybe you do want to spend less time with them because you
Mm-hmm.
want to be with people that are supportive, that feel like your cohort, feel like your supporters.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not one-sided. Hopefully, you're providing that back to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of like it's a symbiotic.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking to create symbiosis.
So, my last question is, if someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in entertainment?
Mm. That's funny. It's funny because it almost feels like, what do you want them to say at your funeral? And I think about that sometimes, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I don't even want a funeral. Maybe it won't be good. But, I would want to be highlighted for being a person of strong opinions,
Mm-hmm.
A fierce feminist,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a person who built a group of friends based around similar energy, more than are we all of the same racial makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully considered to be a generous person, a good party thrower. I guess I can't think of anything else.
Nice. So, if anybody wants to get in contact with you or follow you somewhere, what can they reach out to?
I'm on LinkedIn. My website is showingup.net. Those are probably the two best. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to thank you for coming on my platform and allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
Very fun. Great conversation, Deborah. Thank you.
And to everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Citadel, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.